This channel is sponsored by the Army Painter.
If you've been playing Warhammer for a minute, you've probably heard a bunch of terms that don't really appear on the rules. Some are just abbreviations of existing rules, while others sound abjectly ridiculous, like Uppy-Downy. Now, we're not going to go defining every single rule in the main rulebook, that's literally what the rules already do, but we'll try and clear up some of those cockamamie competitive colloquialisms and make things just a bit clearer. I'm part-time competitive sicko and former gifted student Campbell McLaughlin, and today we're breaking down competitive 40K vocabulary. If you'd like some extra credit, it wouldn't hurt to hit that subscribe button. And naturally, you'll want to know this info before heading to goonhammer.com so you can finally decode just what our writers are talking about in competitive innovations. Link in the description. Before we get too into the weeds, there are a few abbreviations that show up pretty often. These are particularly handy in our own writing on goonhammer.com, but I'll break them down here. DZ refers to deployment zone. Let's start things off simple. FNP refers to the Feel No Pain ability. Saves are usually abbreviated as a number and a plus sign, so if a unit needs to roll a 3 or better to save, we'll usually say it needs a 3+ or a 3-up. To represent an invulnerable save, that'll sometimes be written with 2 pluses, like 3++. Real sickos will often put 3 pluses after a save to represent a Feel No Pain, but instead of 3++, it's often preferred to write 3+ Feel No Pain. AOC is an acronym for Armor of Contempt, a Space Marine stratagem that reduces the armor penetration of incoming attacks by 1. Now, this stratagem is widely available across a number of Marine detachments, sometimes with other names, but other factions have similar takes, like the Votann Void Hardened stratagem. No matter the name, it's Armor of Contempt in spirit. Critical hits and critical wounds happen on natural rolls of a 6, that is, with no modifiers, and sometimes abilities like a Black Templar Marshal's Inspirational Exemplar rule let you score critical hits on a different number, in his case, on 5s. In these cases, you might say crit 5s. Critical wounds work the same way. Those usually lead into devastating wounds, and what do you know, those get abbreviated too. Devastating wounds are often summed up as dev wounds, lethal hits as lethals, and sustained hits as sustains. And while those are always assumed to be on 6s as per the critical hit rule, if those crits are triggering on a different number, you might see that summed up as something like lethal 5s, or my personal favorite, lethal and sustained hits on 5s, or lethal sussy 5+y. Yes, I'm trying to make it happen. I designed the stupid shirt and everything. Shut up. MEQ is an old one, and it's used to denote Marine equivalent. It's used to refer to any unit with toughness 4, a 3-up save, and usually 2 wounds. Likewise, TEQ stands for Terminator equivalent, and refers to toughness 5, 3 wound models with a 2-up armor save and a 4-up invulnerable save. You might be thinking that's very Marine-centric, but so is Warhammer 40,000. MSU is another 3-letter acronym. God, you need an MLS for all these TLAs. MSU stands for Multiple Small Units, or Minimum Sized Units. This is for when you take, well, just that, a load of small units, usually at the minimum size. It's generally good for flexibility and flooding the board, though you don't usually get as much out of characters or stratagems as a result. WAC is, well, whack. It's short for win at all costs, and it's more of a socially constructed boogeyman than anything concrete in Warhammer. It's the notion that someone would forego friendly competition, sportsmanship, or even the boundaries of the rules of the game just to win. And even at top tournament tables, it's not something that really exists outside of the wildest edge cases. There's a huge difference between wanting to be good at Warhammer and win events, and just being a jerk willing to cheat over some plastic space Barbies. And jerks are going to show up just as often outside of tournaments and competitive play. Ingress is short for rapid ingress. It's often used like a verb, in other words, I ingressed this unit. It's a common stratagem that's useful across a load of armies. Oaths is short for the Space Marine Army special rule, Oath of Moment, which allows you to pick a unit against which you'll reroll hit rolls. Marines aren't the only ones who get something like this, but it's where you see it the most. Heroic, used to refer to the heroic intervention stratagem and similar abilities. In other words, when you can charge a unit that just finished charging one of your own, or charge an enemy unit that's close by in your opponent's charge phase. With the abbreviations out of the way, let's move on to the core of this video, which is defining all those inscrutable terms you see thrown around with competitive Warhammer. Some might seem pretty self-explanatory, but pay attention. There will be a test, and your grade depends on it. I don't want to see any of you in summer school. CP reduction. Short for command point reduction, it bridges the gap between just being an abbreviation and being a general rule you find around the game. It's the ability to reduce the cost of a stratagem, usually by 1 command point. It's common across Marine armies where captains of all armor types usually have it, but it shows up elsewhere too, typically on characters like the Votans, Uthar the Destined. It does exactly what it says on the tin, reduces the command point cost of stratagems. Damage reduction. Similarly, damage reduction abilities like the Redemptor Dreadnought's Duty Eternal ability subtract damage from failed saves, usually to a minimum of 1. Bracketing. There's loads of units in 40K, usually monsters and vehicles, which have some change to their rules after being reduced to a lower number of wounds. Usually when they're below a third of their wounds, they have a damaged rule, which is often referred to as bracketing. Most of the time this is just a -1 to hit for their attacks, but sometimes it can have a different effect, like Scarbrand gaining extra attacks because he's just so dang mad you shot at him. Bracketing is when a unit's rules change after taking a certain amount of damage. Expansion. This is an old StarCraft term ported into Warhammer, so keep that APM up. This refers to the objective in no man's land that's closest to your deployment zone, though only some layouts have this. Sometimes they're equidistant instead. Expansions are the closest no man's land objective to your deployment zone. Blanking. The more extreme version of damage reduction is blanking. Occasionally you'll find a unit with the ability to reduce incoming damage to 0. The Emperor's Champion is great for this, as his Armor of Faith ability changes the damage of a failed save to 0. This is often called blanking, and it's always limited somehow, like only being able to use once per phase, turn, or game. It also doesn't help against bonus damage from things like Melta, but that's its own weird rules interaction, and this is vocabulary class, not math or science or whatever else that would be. Anyway, blanking is when you reduce the damage of an attack to 0. Hammer units and Deathstars. Hammer units are the big threats you often build an army around. This might be a big squad with a load of attached characters, sometimes called a Death Star, don't sue us Disney, and it's more often than not a melee threat of some sort. They've got their roots in the benighted days of 6th and 7th edition, but still show up occasionally in modern 40K. This could be 20 Black Templar Crusaders with High Marshal Helbrecht. It could be 10 Tempestus Scions with an attached command squad and all the plasma in the world. It could be a big brick of Deathshroud Terminators with a Lord of Contagion, or 10 Vanilla Terminators with a pair of characters and enhancements to make them nearly unkillable. These units tend to be expensive, are often pretty durable, and positioning with them is key, as you don't want your big 500-point squad hanging out an objective in your backfield. Hammer units are the key threats you build your army around. The Go Turn. You might spend the first few turns of the game driving your transports around, hiding in cover and making some pot shots, but not committing particularly hard to any flank and largely keeping your army protected. Then, it's the time when the magic happens. That one big turn when you bring in your reserves, jump out of your transports, blow your command points in one go, and go all out trying to break the enemy's back. This is what we call the Go Turn. Think of it like the turn where your army really does what it does best, enacting your game plan and committing to the table. The biggest risk here is when it doesn't pop off. Maybe you fail those clutch charges and leave your hammer unit in the open, or the damage rolls in your gun line just go cold. Maybe you wait too long and just don't have the assets left on the board to actually go for broke anymore. Sometimes we just have to do the best we can with what we've got. The Go Turn is when you fully commit to the battle and send your units at the enemy. Staging. As someone who clearly struggles with object permanence, staging can be a hard one. While it's tempting to fully yeet your units as far forward as possible in the hopes that they live through your opponent's turn, sometimes it's smarter to plan a turn or two ahead and get your pieces into position. While you could jump out of that impulsor and maybe make a lucky long bomb charge, it's probably smarter to stage for a turn, driving that tank up into a hidden position so the Marines inside can get out next turn closer to where they want to be. Staging is when you move units into position so they'll be in a better position in a later turn, typically setting up for charge moves. Vect. So back in the day, there was a Drukhari character named Asdrubael Vect. He still exists in the fluff, but he was a big mean elf on a pleasure barge with some regrettably sculpted slaves aboard. Of course, back then they weren't the Drukhari, they were called Dark Eldar. God, you can't even call them Dark Eldar anymore. You couldn't make blazing saddles today. In 8th edition, they introduced the Agents of Vect stratagem, which could make a stratagem cost an extra command point. They were great for shutting down your opponent's plans, and even now, realizing you can't overwatch or use a key stratagem because somebody is hanging out nearby can absolutely make or break a turn. In the years since, similar abilities have cropped up with the Lord of Deceit rule on units like the Calidus Assassin, Cypher, Logan Grimnar, and others, but the gist remains the same: increasing the cost of stratagems and making them more expensive or impossible for your opponent to use. Uppy-Downy. Winning the award for the dumbest title but most prevalent ability here is Uppy-Downy. This is a hugely useful rule that lets you pull a unit off the battlefield at one point and place it back down in another, letting you get those shooting units into a better position or getting your cheap little scoring pieces where they need to be. There's usually stipulations on where they can pop back up, typically outside of 9 inches of enemy models. Units like Space Marine Scouts have this built into their datasheet, while some detachments like the Eldari Windrider Host or the Grey Knights Core Army rule let you do this too. In short, Uppy-Downy lets you take a unit from one place on the board and put it back into reserves, where it can emerge someplace else on a following turn. Surge moves. These have been codified into the main rules, but only recently, so we thought we'd touch on them here. These started with Black Templars back in 4th edition and have moved to other equally bloodthirsty factions since. Basically, these are abilities that allow out-of-phase movement, usually after something specific happens. It's named for the Khorne Berserker's Blood Surge ability, where a unit could move after losing a model to shooting. Every unit with one of these is a little different, with some kind of stipulations on where they can go, what they can go towards, and if they can end up in engagement range of enemy units or not. In short, they let a unit move in some phase other than their own movement phase when specific events occur. Most of the time, that means when you shoot that unit, they'll move towards you. What a mouthful. Reactive Moves. Most armies have some way to make a reactive move, usually letting a unit move after an enemy unit ends their own move within 9 inches or so. This is a little different from a surge move since it doesn't usually let you get into engagement range, but mechanically it's pretty similar. It can be particularly devious as a way to move units out of charge range, onto objectives, into the safety of a transport, or move one unit in the way of another one. Reactive moves let one of your units make a normal move after an enemy unit ends a move within a certain distance. Sticky. Like your 3-year-old nephew, some units are just sticky. How? I have no clue! I made sure he washed his hands after we had pancakes and there's still maple syrup handprints everywhere. In 40K terms, this is when a unit lets you maintain control of an objective without actively standing on it, which is sometimes known as Objective Secured or OBSEC. The best known version of this is with Intercessors, who let an objective stay yours after leaving it, but there are other, more sophisticated versions in other armies, like Chaos Knights, who can sticky an objective with an exact objective control score, making it harder for a single enemy dude to pop in and take it. Specifics aside, sticking lets you control an objective even after a controlling unit moves off of it. Recursion. Recursion is when you take a unit that's been destroyed and bring it back onto the battlefield. Sometimes this is called recycling, but the only greenwashing happening here is in our painting tutorials. There's often a limit on this ability. For instance, the reinforcement stratagem from the Combined Arms detachment in the Astra Militarum Codex can only be used once per game, so you better make it count. While the specifics may change, recursion is what happens when you bring a dead unit back to the board. Distraction Carnifex. I think I first heard this one in 4th edition, but the concept hasn't changed much. This is the practice of taking a modestly dangerous, modestly durable unit, like, say, a Carnifex, imagine that, and forcing your opponent to deal with it. That dreadnought might not be key to your plan, but as long as it's running up the board zapping stuff with its plasma cannon, it's gonna be a thorn in your opponent's side. The key here is that your Distraction Carnifex has to be threatening enough to draw fire from other, more valuable units, but cheap enough that you can afford to lose it. What cheap means changes based on your list and faction, but generally you don't want to spend more than 120 points or so. The goal is to distract your opponent with a modestly dangerous unit that isn't part of your game plan. Screens. They're not just for doors on submarines anymore. Screening units are usually cheap, chaff units that are there to get in the way of your opponent and protect your better stuff. Classic examples of this would be your poor bloody infantry standing in front of your Rogel's Dorn and Lehman's Russ, sticking around to keep your more valuable units safe, preferably more than a few inches away so people can't just charge your squishy screening unit and pile into your more valuable stuff behind it. Screens are generally cheap units that protect your more valuable ones. Deep Strike Screening. While regular screening units are better used for forming a barrier between your opponent and something you very much don't want them to touch, screening for deep strikes and reserves is a little different. This is when you try and prevent your opponent's deep striking units from being able to set up where they want to, often by stretching units across your backfield to maximize the amount of ground they cover. Since units can't usually deep strike within 9 inches of one of yours, you might conga line some grots across your home objective, or take advantage of units that deny deep strikes in a larger range, like Space Marine infiltrators. Deep strike screening is when you position your units to prevent enemy units from being set up. Move blocking. If screens are there to protect your own units, move blockers are there to get in the way of your opponent. Think of move blocking like a more proactive version of the same concept. Small 5-girl units of Seraphim, 3-man units of Outriders, or any number of scouting and infiltrating units can drive, fly, or advance up the board and just stand there in the way of some major melee threat. That big Berserker squad can't move through the wall of bodies you stuck in front of them, so they're gonna have to waste their charge on that cheapo unit, stand back and shoot, or find a way around. Move blocking is when you place a unit in your opponent's way and force them to find a way around it. Jail. A recurring theme in 10th edition has been jail lists. We've had Wolf Jail, Cultist Jail, Poxwalker Jail, and more besides, and while there is a soul in Wolf Jail, I am not free. These are lists that flood the board early on, usually trapping their opponent in their deployment zone with durable units that take up a lot of real estate on the board. They might not kill that much, but that's not the point. That horde of zombies or beefy dogs are there to tie up the enemy while speedy units nab objectives behind them, or more powerful units get into position to actually do some damage. A good jail list traps the enemy in their deployment zone with large numbers of durable units. Trades. Trading units is a pretty straightforward and easy to understand concept. While it's smart to assume that everything in your army will die, death comes for us all, you want to make sure that when your units do inevitably expire, they take something down with them. Now, if your 3-man unit of Eradicators rocked up, blew up a knight, and then were immediately killed, that's a pretty good trade. Those dudes were cheap, and that knight most certainly was not. Now, if your Dorn commander came out of cover to blow up a Chaos Rhino, then was promptly lasered out of existence in exchange, that would be a bad trade, as your Dorn provided more damage output and utility at a higher cost than the little shoebox it blew up. Trades are when you sacrifice a unit to destroy another unit. Honest Warhammer. This is a term used to refer to armies and lists that just play the regular game of Warhammer 40,000. They don't move out of sequence, they can't shoot things they can't see, and they can't leave the table and come back onto it. With these armies, what you see is what you get. These armies aren't bad per se, but they can often find themselves at a disadvantage against armies which can move multiple times per turn or turn off Overwatch. Honest Warhammer refers to a straightforward playstyle without any tricks. And that's it for today's vocab lesson. While this isn't comprehensive, 40K is a living, breathing game with new stuff happening all the time, we hope this is enough of a baseline to keep up when players start rattling off competitive slang. We didn't cover old stuff like Fish of Fury or Rhino Rush, but I'm sure by the time you're watching this, there will already be some new concept with a freshly inscrutable name, and we'll be there to define it for you as soon as I can find a tweed jacket. If you learned a thing or two from this video, why not hit that like and subscribe button? As hard as we tried here, I'm sure we forgot something somewhere, so feel free to comment down below with all the things you think we missed, or whatever hyperlocal slang your group uses in your own games. Maybe if there's enough of them, we'll make a second one of these. You can also support us on Patreon for bonus podcasts, extra features and tabletop battles like faction-specific resource trackers, and other cool stuff. Then head to goonhammer.com to put your newly acquired lexicon to the test. I've been your non-certified vocabulary teacher, Check Plus McSyllabus, and if I'm 15 minutes late, you're legally allowed to click away from this video. Thanks for watching.